What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of The Ravens Watch. I am your host, David Lee Corbo, aka The Raven. And before we get into it, I just wanted to remind you guys of a couple of things. One, we dropped merch for Nephilim Death Squad. So you can find that at toplobsta.com. That's TOPLOBSTA.com. We have a bunch of Nephilim Death Squad shirts, hats, jackets, hoodies, as well as one of my favorite designs, which is the Ronald McDonald's Children's Foundation, but it actually has six fingers because Ronald McDonald is a Nephilim. Uh, you could also go to our new Nephilim Death Squad YouTube channel. We're trying to consolidate the fan base and draw a line of separation so that the Ravens Watch is one thing and Nephilim Death Squad is another thing. And that way, as we're streaming, we no longer have to stream on like 5 different platforms. Because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we're streaming on YouTube in probably 3 different places. We're streaming on Rumble, and we're also streaming on Twitter. And so we're just trying to consolidate that. That was part of getting Nephilim Death Squad to grow. And now that we are getting there, I think it's time to start separating it up a little bit. Other than that, I think that'll be business as usual. So I'd like to introduce our guest today. We are joined by Ray and Tabitha Hawk of the Tennessee and Ohio Paranormal Society. So let me go ahead and bring them up. Boom and boom. Hello, ladies. Before we get into it, if you could introduce yourselves and tell the audience where to find your work. We'll start with Ray.
Sure. I'm Ray from Ohio, and you can find me on Twitter. My handle is Kitty Treats on there. It's a really old account, but that's the most updated place I'm at. We also have a Facebook page called Tops. Um, but you can find Tabitha and I on it's called the TNOH Para Society on Twitter. Or you can just go to our website, Tennessee, Ohio Paranormal Society. It's a long word, .com.
Long
And
name.
Tabitha, is there anything like you'd like to add?
No, that's great. Yeah, Tennessee, Ohio Paranormal Society website has a lot of stuff on there, like photos, and I myself do a lot of like nature and travel photography. So I have a website, tabithahawk.com, and of course I'm on Instagram as well. Just I believe at Tabitha Hawk. Very original.
Spell your name wrong.
Right. So I think that if you're not familiar with the show, which is a high likelihood, it's a new show. The Ravens Watch has only been around now, I think we just hit 5 months. But this show is predominantly exploration of the paranormal supernatural realm, as well as occultism and conspiracy theories. But we focus mainly here on the paranormal aspect, although we do bleed over into those other realms a little bit. As they do, they're all connected, right? And so I would be very interested in hearing. So when it comes to these kind of paranormal expeditions, right? Like, this is always something that I've been interested in, but I'm very cautious. I mean, I've had like one experience when I was younger with a Ouija board, and I don't like. I think everybody kind of has like this moment when they're younger where you wonder if it's something that you should mess with. I only ever did it once. It was very short lived, and I don't think we actually we drew it ourselves on a piece of like what would you call that, press board, like from the back of a dresser, that you got from IKEA. So it was very much like I'm hoping that since it wasn't made of like some ancient oak tree, that nothing actually happened that day. But I've always been really cautious myself. I don't really I'm not so into going out and doing these things, but I am into people who do it themselves. And I'm always curious as to, I think it's kind of become a tradition, even though it's only been 5 months, of asking the guests, because I'm fascinated with this idea of like what got you here in the first place. Like, um, there's usually a catalyst for people. A lot of people go their entire lives just sort of ignoring the spiritual realm. And then there is a whole subsect of humanity that seems to be drawn to it. And I theorize that that's because of personal experiences, or maybe secondhand experiences. You heard a story from a loved one or someone close to you that just really piqued your interest. Uh, what was it for you guys that brought you, into the line of thinking to create a paranormal society, a group based around it?
Sure. Did you want me to go first, Tabitha? Or
Sure.
right.
Yeah, I don't want to be too long-winded.
Well, I watched a lot of TV when I was a kid. Watched Unsolved Mysteries. That's what got me into that. But my mom also had a lot of personal experiences where she's kind of very spiritual. She had this one story that always stuck with me where she actually had I mean, this is probably way too deep for me to go into this, but she had like a miscarriage when I was probably like maybe around 7 years old. And I remember her talking about how she woke me up because she thought someone broke into the house, and she heard footsteps running toward her bed and all this stuff, and she swears like that's when the baby was gone, like something took it. And as a kid,
Wow.
that's really that's very profound, like something it's kind of very scary to tell a child. And so that on top of me, watching a lot of television with all, there's a lot of cool stuff back in the 90s, in the 80s for you to get into. So that's really what got me into it. And I had, having family that were very open about talking about, different experiences that they had. Myself, like it's kind of funny to say, like I'm still kind of a skeptic, but we've always had some experiences where it keeps us going, and it's really hard to prove that it was just a house being old and creaky, or like the floor creaking. Tabitha and I actually have some stuff that we can share, in a bit, some photos of this one picture that's like just I didn't even see it until she found it later. This was at a place called the Prospect Place in Ohio. But Tabitha, why don't you go ahead and tell him how you got into this?
I'm actually just see you there for a second. Can you go back? What is it that
Sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Oh no, it's happening again. Okay,
could you
so
say-
you were saying that you actually had some experiences along with Tabitha. Well, before we get into that, Tabitha, what is it that brought you to this whole situation, the paranormal?
Yeah, it's certainly an unusual field to be into. So for me, I think a lot of reasons people get into it is personal experiences. So I had a personal experience, I believe it was in 6th grade, a couple of really weird experiences. One was I had a wooden window frame, and so it was very hard to lift up and down. So usually my dad would have to come in there to push up the window frame, like in the summer, to get the air going. And I remember I was sitting in the room one day reading the Bible, and it just slammed shut on its own, which was something that, I mean, I would practically have to jump up and like with all my weight, like push it down. Like that was something that just didn't go on its own. And then there was one time I went to eat dinner, and I always close the door before I leave the room. And I came back, and everything, it looked like someone went in there like a bull in a china shop. I mean, it was like everything was thrown all around. Like, it made no sense. I had books that were on the bookshelf that had been thrown on the ground. I could attest everybody that was in the house was in the kitchen. And like no one would have done that anyways. I was like, for the life of me, could not figure out how that happened. And that whole window thing happened like just days prior. Then there was one time when I was walking in the hallway, I just saw like a translucent figure in the hallway, and it was like floating towards me. And I, in a panic, just like kind of did that whole duck thing, like kind of like in a tornado. I just died my head down and like protected. And I felt this cold, tingly sensation and like the goosebumps, like the hair standing up on your back. It was just, and after that, I was like, I don't know what it is, but I sense things and I don't like it, but I want to know more about it. So I read so many paranormal books and all that. I mean, I was like, it was half interest and half like, oh my God, like this is freaking me out type thing. But as the years have gone by, I still have experiences from time to time. But for the most part, I consider myself a skeptic, where I think the great majority of like the stuff on TV, I think is done for ratings and all that. And like people with just hyper personalities like to put on a good show. And I've kind of realized that I think like 95% of what they consider evidence actually isn't anything, but it's that small percent that you can't shake off. And the experiences I've had throughout the years, I'm like, the vast majority is talking in the dark to yourself and like wanting, like, can you make a sound? Can you show yourself? And nothing happens other than you get really sleepy. And but every now and then you have that experience that you cannot explain other than it was paranormal.
Yeah, I grew up on, I don't know if you guys remember, like Fox Family back before it was ABC Family. They had one of the first instances of sort of like a paranormal exploration. I forget what it was called. It wasn't Ghost Hunters, right? It would have been something that predated Ghost Hunters, but it was a great show. You know, they would go to these haunted places, and I just remember at the time, we're talking like 90, maybe 98, 99. Um, I don't remember seeing a great deal of shows like that before. Now the television is inundated with it, and unfortunately, I think you're right. It's like a lot of it's become highly commercialized, and the main focus is like keeping the show going, coming out with season 2, season 3, season 4, continuing to make money off of it. And one of the things that upsets me more than anything is, I mean, I just don't think you could have anything without an industry built around it, and so the whole industry that's been built around paranormal exploration is this sort of like, did you hear that? And then commercial cut. Like that's the trap, man. That's like where they really it's a model that just won't die. You know, they figured it out long ago, and it's like all they have to do is have something like fall off a shelf and then cut to a commercial break. And they don't ever have to give you anything good. They just need audience retention. And then they look at the numbers and they go, okay, people are sitting through the commercial break and they're going to be here when we return. But there was definitely a time before, I don't know how you guys feel about like characters like Zach Baggins. I heard somebody call him Scooby Douche, and I thought that was one of the most hilarious things I'd ever heard in my life. I lived in Vegas for a while, so he had sort of his like museum out there, the Zach Baggins Museum. I never did go, but um, before Zach Baggins, before Ghost Hunters, things felt a little bit more genuine. And I think what happened was the industry saw that there was an appetite for this stuff, right? Because people, it's like you guys, you have these experiences. Ray, your mother tells you a story. Tabitha, you have firsthand experiences, and it like it's something that you never let go of. It's interesting that way, right? Because it follows you all into adulthood. Whereas it was a blip, not a blip necessarily, but in the grand scheme of things, it only happened a very small percentage of times throughout your entire life experience, and it just grips you, and it stays with you. I'm very much the same way. I've the audience knows a lot of my story, but like when I was younger, we would hear um, people stomping around upstairs, but we didn't have upstairs neighbors. It was a single family home, and my aunt would just say things like, "Oh, that's your grandmother who had passed," and that's what she came to know it as. It was like after she passed, there was always footsteps in her bedroom upstairs. And, they just told us very nonchalantly, me and my cousins, like, oh, yeah, that's just grandma. There was always weird things like that. My family seemed to be pretty comfortable with the idea. And I think very much like you guys, this sort of thing has stayed with me. Although, like I said in the beginning of the show, I've never gone out and done anything. Maybe I have like once or twice with my friends in a place that most likely wasn't haunted. It was just abandoned. And there is a sort of thrill associated with it. I've recognized that. It's like when you go out and you're seeking something that is beyond the veil and trying to communicate with something that's not physical in this realm, but in certain moments when you're walking from here to there, you can feel something changes, the energy of the room changes, and that is not tangible, right? But it's still very real. And it's like you're chasing that constantly, this thing that can't be measured, but feels incredibly real. I'd be very interested in hearing about some of your more fun adventures with one another. I don't know where you guys want to start with that, but I'll pass the ball to you.
Sure. Do you want to start about? We can talk about Prospect Place
Mhm.
because that was pretty fun. We've been to this place for multiple times. It's based in Ohio. It's a historical site, a underground railroad house. There was one of their main stories was a headhunter came on the property and was actually murdered by the people that were, hiding slaves, and they hung him in the barn. Another story was a young girl that died from some kind of, I think, what was it, a sickness, right, Tabitha? Someone that was they buried her in the basement, yeah, and because it was cold, so they put her in a shallow. Was it a well, or I don't remember what that was, but it's basically a dirt floor in their basement, and that's where they would have to put their dead when the ground was too frozen. So they had
Okay.
this sad story about this little girl that was buried there for a bit until the ground was softer. But everyone that goes there has experiences. I'll go into the main one. So Tabitha and I went to, I think it was like the second floor of the building, and we we sat down on the bed, and it broke. And while we're running this, we have a lot of equipment. So we have like a laser grid. You ever seen one of those? It's a bunch of like dots on the wall, and it's what it is. It's to track if there's like something that moves in front of it. And she actually captured an orb that like kind of flew around right when that happened. And a lot of these places, to me at least, it feels like you're being lured to different areas. So like we heard something and we went upstairs to that room. That's why we were, I think, up there. And then later on that same evening, I think we ended up running upstairs because we heard footsteps and there was nobody upstairs. It's like one of those like old farmhouse houses that have like that lookout tower thing. But we, the main event of that, we went to the basement, and we're pretty casual with our ghost hunts. Like we don't try to make everything very serious. We just kind of like let things happen. We just let our equipment run while we're trying to let it capture stuff. So her and I were having a conversation about something, and we were sitting in front of a room that was one of the storage areas in the basement, and she has the camera pointing at us, and she's taking pictures. And then we're done. We pack up, leave. She goes home, checks the pictures, and there's a face of a skull, like looking at it, like behind us. And I can let me see if I can share that if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I can figure
please,
this
absolutely.
out.
Yeah. I just started using this streaming service, so if I could figure it out too.
Let's see. I want to share. There we go. Window.
Now, when you're doing this, you're talking about. Oh, I see right here. Let's check this out.
Okay, so I'll show the hallway first.
Okay.
And
for those of you listening, you're going to want to hit YouTube for this one so that we can have.
There we go. Yeah. So this is the main hallway, and you see her camera's on the left, and then there's a circle.
Oh, I think it opened up in another
right there
window.
by the door. Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Maybe I should do the whole screen. Might be I could do that.
Yeah, the window that it opened. Just try to share that.
There you go. Entire screen.
Boom. There we go.
How's that? All right. So this is the hallway. On the right hand side is the door.
Oh, I can see the laser grid. Right? Is that what I'm looking at too? Down the hallway.
And I think this was taken with just flash, just so we could get the whole area. But so we had no idea like there was something going on behind us.
Can you go back to that one for a second? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Because it looks like something is. Yeah. Is that like a face? Is there any way you could zoom in on that? It's like something is hiding in the corner.
Yeah, we have another picture of it.
See, this has got to be really unsettling kind of stuff when you discover these in post and you're sitting at home like, oh, look, there's a greasy demon hiding in the corner. Oh, is this an actual?
Yeah, so this is the zoomed in photo. So it's really hard to see, but there's like kind of like this white area.
Yeah,
and that's where it looks like a face.
Is this like a public place that they've given you access to?
Like
you're allowed to be here?
It's not public. We get invited. Sometimes some of the events you pay, like you donate like a certain amount of money to investigate. It just depends, like, you know, what they're looking for. But yeah, this place, cool. They've had so many experiences, so they let people go there to investigate. But like that's.
There is a sort of a plethora of instruments that paranormal investigators use, and it's gotten to the point where like I don't remember what people used to use back in the day, like maybe like dowsing rods, like where they had the two rods and they would kind of like cross over. But like now there's equipment involved in this, like, and there are pieces that some folks will swear by. Oh my God, you have dowsing rods!
We have so much stuff. Like we have that. Tabitha has like a. What is that? Detects radiation.
That's hilarious that I said that, and you've got them sitting right there. Do they? Would you say dowsing rods work?
I don't know. Like I've had. I like to use them when it's a really quiet night. Nothing's going on, so like I can kind of show you like what we do. It's like I'll say like point to a direction where we should go, and then if it like it will point that way, and then we'll walk that way if you feel like doing it. Other ways to use it is like yes and no questions. So like it will cross for yes, and then this means no when it's not crossed.
Okay. That's
but people used to detect water though. That's really what they were like, just branches.
I've heard that, and I don't understand. I can't even begin to understand like what is happening there, how they're detecting water. But I am aware of that. When you go to these places, I imagine, because like I can't go someplace and just start talking to spirits, not because I don't believe it, but because I do believe it, and it immediately gets me like feeling weird. Like when you ask a question into the ether, right? What sorts of things are you asking? Is there like a standard kind of like line of dialogue that you like to open with, or a direction that you like to take things typically when you go on these outings?
Sure. Well, I'm pretty spoiled where I tend to bring sometimes like a third person on, and they are I would say like they're sensitive. Myself, I'm not. That's why I have like all this equipment. But
felt like there was disappointment in your voice when you said that.
But I like I like all the electronic stuff, so that's cool. But but there's so many people that like have experiences where they feel dizzy or they feel cold when they're in a room that there might be something in there, like a spirit. So we'll have like a friend with us, and they'll say, hey, I feel nauseous or whatever. And then, or they'll start asking questions like, but anyway, so yeah, most people will just start asking questions like, is somebody here? And then usually our equipment will, like a K2 meter will go off, which is, what that is, that detects like the EMF wave. So electronic interferences, or if you're close to an electrical outlet, it will also, go off. So you have to be careful with your stuff, so you're not like getting false, positives. So Tabitha and I were kind of the same, where we just let our stuff run, and then we'll sit down for a bit and then ask, some questions about the place. We like to know a little bit about the history, so we'll find out, who owned this house. If somebody died in the house, we'll ask for their names and to see if they're there, and we'll see if they, pop up on our voice recorders. So if you get a voice, that's called an EVP. Yeah. So that's one of my favorites is a voice recorder. And like you said, like there's people back then, there wasn't a ton of equipment. So, you can just take this with you and do your own ghost hunt. You don't really need anything else. You have a cell phone that has a camera, so you can take pictures. But yeah, like I don't know what would you have to say to that, Tabitha?
Well, there's definitely things like when you get like a group of people, like sometimes I've been on investigations and there'll be like 20 people in a room. And I think like that's where things can get a little dicey when there's that much equipment. Sometimes I wonder if they're interfering with one another. The most common thing that I see that where people may have false positives is their cell phones are turned on, and it's good to put them in airplane mode. Because one thing that if you put a cell phone that's not in airplane mode near like a K2 meter or like one of those, it will light up. It'll light, and it's very common. Like so what I'll see is there'll be a group of people, and like someone will be like, "Well, I guess there's nothing over here," and they'll walk over and like, "Oh my gosh, it's lighting up," and like they're like. And then they'll go back to asking questions again, thinking that all the action was caused by a ghost, when in reality it was just their cell phone got close to the thing. So
that's a. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so it's like little things like that I sometimes wonder if people like they get really excited and ended up being a false positive, and they didn't intend to. Very common on these public events. What I like to do is go to a public event, get a feel for it, but you're not going to get a really good investigation. It's best to go again, not alone, but with a small group of people, 2 or more, or 2 to 10, but especially if it's big, then you can spread out. But I've gone on places that had 150 people, and I also think that ghosts can, if they can sense people, if you're in a room surrounding like the center, and like there's, 20 different devices in the center, I'm not going to go out there if I'm a ghost, especially from the 1800s. They're like, what's happening here? So I often think that less is more when it comes to paranormal, because they're people, treat them like a person. Like if they're shy, having them come in the center when there's 20 people staring at them, they're going to be like, and I find that those kind of nights are quiet, because I feel like if we're going to treat a ghost, treat them like they were a human, so sometimes it's like little things like everybody sits in the back and let like or in the front, and have the other area clear, so that way ghosts can feel like they're welcomed to come in front of us, without feeling like they're going to get pounced on.
Yeah, you mentioned Ouija boards. So a lot of places that do public ghost hunts will not let you use a Ouija board, because which is kind of funny to me, because you're still trying to talk to something that you can't see. Like you're trying to kind of welcome this entity in here, if you believe that. You have to actually sign. There's places where we had to sign waivers where you can't, take that with you or even, use it. But they're totally okay if you're, asking questions out loud for somebody that died in the house, which I
Yeah,
think
that's
is
a
kind
good
of
point.
funny. But there's just a big stigma on that. That goes back to really, what's that show? I think The Exorcist is kind of where that
Oh,
came
right.
from. Yeah, the Ouija board. This is named Captain Howdy.
Yeah,
But yeah.
I actually have so I have a lot of I don't go out seeking these things, but I do have a lot of experiences what seems to be like negative, entities. The reason I think that they're negative is because they seem to uh be able to like impose feelings of dread, and I think they kind of feed off of it. Um and so when you're saying like big groups aren't necessarily too conducive, I would imagine part of the reason, at least if you're dealing with something that's negative, is that I'm sorry, I think my dog is smashing against the door because he's an idiot. He's just a puppy. That the entities that are going to feed off of like fear, let's say, because I imagine there's an array of things you can contact, right? Of all different sorts of moral alignments. And I think that the ones that feed off of fear, well, you're braver in a group. It's when you're isolated that things like really tend to creep up on you, and it's something really subtle that can like stand your hair up on edge. And that, for these things, in my opinion, and the research that I've done, like I said, I've not been out in the field, but I do collect testimony from people who have had experiences, and then I compare and contrast them against other testimony and mine as well. um but I think that part of the reason that they would be less likely to manifest in a group is just because you're braver in a group. But on the Ouija board topic, I have an aunt who unfortunately is schizophrenic, multiple personality disorder, and she uh, actually started showing after a traumatic experience with a Ouija board, and then it totally set her life on a completely different path, like permanently. It's been a disaster for her. But I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
that that's inducive or indicative of using the Ouija board, as much as it's like she may have had something going on already, and this was it's like people who are schizophrenic but haven't shown yet. They say they actually shouldn't smoke marijuana because
Mm-hmm.
it can like trigger the moment for them for the rest of their lives, kind of a deal. And it's not that marijuana caused schizophrenia; it's that this person was already, um, you know, somebody who was likely to develop it or something of that nature. Almost like it's got a not an incubation period, but it's sitting underneath the surface and
Mm-hmm.
then becomes active after an experience. And so, but I do think that there are plenty of people that will use them and like nothing will happen ever for
Yeah,
them.
and I don't use them myself, but I always thought it was kind of funny just because of the tools that we use are very kind of similar, because you're still trying to get in, you're trying to contact
Right.
something. But
Yeah.
I don't, I agree with them. Like if they don't want you to use that, then don't do that. Um,
Have you seen
me,
have either of you two seen the Hasbro is coming out with the Ouija board that's infused with artificial intelligence?
no,
Oh,
Yeah, so Hasbro makes Ouija boards, right? They always have. You can find them
yeah,
on I think on the shelves in like Walmart even. And now, with all the weirdness that's been going on with AI, they are now infusing one, so you can communicate verbally with this Ouija board instead. Which like speaks a lot to your point, Ray, is that all this equipment is for that anyway, right? So the idea that
mm,
there's a hierarchy of them, maybe it's because when you use a Ouija board, there's a cultural overload, right? Your idea of what this thing is has like decades and decades of culture behind it. It's certainly going, I would imagine, past The Exorcist, but yeah, I mean, it
yeah.
goes all the way back to it's a piece of
There's
Americana.
there's a really good book. I have a bunch of stuff I'm going to show off, but it's called Occult America by Mitch Horowitz. He actually talks a
Oh
lot about
yeah,
that because they called him because back they called them spirit boards, and that was really very popular with the spiritualist movement because a lot of people passed away from different diseases and stuff, and that was a way for them to feel connected with their loved one. But yeah, there can be negative attachments to that, where depending on what who you are and what you're going through, you may it may not be the right thing to be
Right.
using.
And also if there's some things seem to be generational, like my grandmother thought she was a clairvoyant, and I never really knew her very well. These are just things I know of her. And I went through her things as I got older. I found handwritten papers like at length of how to remote view. And
Oh
my
wow.
grandmother, yeah, she was. I mean, this is my mother's mom, right? So when she passed, it was 96, and she was already in her late 50s, I believe. So for someone to be writing this, and whenever it was, the 70s or the 80s when she wrote it, to me, it just speaks volumes because it's without the internet.
Yeah.
I'm always looking back, like, how did
Yeah.
anybody do it? How did they do anything without the internet? But my grandma was writing papers on remote viewing, thought she was a clairvoyant, had a lot of experiences with sleep paralysis and various like shadow entities and everything. And I'd be interested. I know we were supposed to and we will get into a lot of your stories, but I can't help but imagine that you guys don't have some thoughts like on this whole spiritual realm, the nature of these various things you can communicate with. Like, what is, I think maybe gone are the days where everything is just like ghosts and spirits, right? Or like it's demonic. Like, there's, um, sort of a plethora of different things. And as people who are actually out there, you and Tabitha, looking around for these things and communicating, do you have any thoughts as to like, I mean, it's just the game has evolved so much. You're going out there with like real Ghostbusters equipment. You know what I mean? Like you're spending a gratuitous amount of money too. I'm sure these things aren't cheap. And along with that kind of investment comes a psychological investment. Do you have any thoughts on sort of the spiritual realm and what it is that you're communicating with? Is it just dead people? Is it the echoes of a traumatic event? Is it a many things?
You're not gonna like my answer. It's all of above. We went to we miss our loved ones. Like we went to talk. We would have talked to our people who passed away in our life. But then you also have the exciting stuff where it's like you watch a scary movie and then you're like, okay, what is this real? Like I want to see if this is if there's some kind of monster lurking in a basement. Um, in the cemeteries. For me, it's always evolving. I don't, I we experience stuff that's happened, but I don't. I still ask that question, like, is this something that is trying to tell me something? Or am I experiencing some kind of like residual haunting? Did I just happen to walk in on something profound happened, like a long time ago, that keeps repeating over and over, and you just happen to experience their moment that they're trying to show off? That was like one of my bigger like theories of that. But I don't know. I think I think we're both us as people, like we're trying to understand what happens after you die. And then you have it also feels like there's other things that are not just like the typical angels and demons that you read about in the Bible that's trying to contact you. There seems to be some, it could be something else too, but I don't know. That's why we keep doing it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a loaded question too, because I don't think anybody knows the answer, but I do think that's the long range desire of the paranormal, is to answer the question: is there an afterlife? What does it look like? And can we communicate across that barrier? I know that my thinking has changed over the years on spirituality. Um, Growing up very conservative, I've kind of viewed it as my understanding of Revelation. In the Bible, it was like saying that the dead in Christ will rise up after the trumpet. So I was like, so that means that we're I was like, well, and that means when we're going to grandma's funeral and they say, well, grandma's looking down from heaven. I'm like, well, that's a lie. Because I was like, if in Revelation during the rapture, if we're all supposed to meet, J dude in the air, I was like, well, that meant that we're still on Earth. Our bodies are still here. And then like Catholics, they believe in purgatory. So you're neither in heaven or hell because heaven hasn't been made. So like reading the Bible, it really says that a new heaven will be created. So, and it sounds like from the literal reading of it that no, that we don't go to heaven at all. We just stay in purgatory, and that's why the saying is, "May they rest in peace." That that they're neither they're here. Their spirit is at rest, and that is simply waiting for that arrival. So, like back when I really thought about it, I was like, it would make no sense to die, go to heaven. God sends you back to your body to just go to heaven again. And I was like, well, that's a lot of work. So, so I was like, well, if I went with that level of thinking, that would explain why we could talk to ghosts in the now, is because they are at rest. And perhaps some had traumatic crossings per se, or, traumatic where they died like in an accident, murder, or something like that. So they are angry and looking for someone to tell the story to. So that's kind of what, when I initially got into paranormal. But honestly, the more I've done paranormal, the less answers I have. And it's like, well, I thought after all these years I would know more, and I'm like, I personally don't believe hell is even a real thing anymore. It's like I was like, I don't even know what heaven is. It's like, I think it's so easy to paint the afterlife based off of religion that you were told growing up. But there's 8 billion people in the world, all with different beliefs and all that. And it's like, well, would their afterlife look a lot different? Like Buddha and all that, like how they view enlightenment. Like if you die, will you see Muhammad? And that's when I started thinking of the big picture. It's like, why should it be conservative American afterlife when the afterlife could be so much more than we could even understand? It's like I do believe our energy carries on, but how that does, like some people claim that ghosts are actually, or at least some ghosts are, you're not actually seeing them per se. It's actually in a way of thinking, a problem with the matrix, that you're actually seeing a time change. So like if they see you, they're actually seeing the future, and that you're actually seeing the past. And it's just that moment. So that person that walked, that you saw a figure walk into the wall, you're like, why would they walk there? And then in renovation, you realize there was a door that was like walled off. And it's like, oh, well, this is a building that was made in the 1800s. So it's like, well, that person didn't walk into the wall. They walked into a door. But perhaps they saw a ghost, and it was me, and I'm seeing a ghost, and it's them. But it's just for a fleeting moment in time. So there's some ghost hunters that go with the time dilation theory. But I believe that some could be, someone that and it's like a psychic connection across. But honestly, the more I've done this, I wish I had more answers, and I think I got more mystery.
Yeah, we still play. We have a lot of conversations about this, and I think the great thing about paranormal groups is like it brings a lot of different faiths and just beliefs together, because everyone's trying to find out like what is this, why that we can't explain. But yeah, I don't have a great answer for that.
Honestly,
Kind
though,
of stuff.
I think that's great because, um, like anything, when you don't know about it, it seems shallow, right? And then you start to pursue this thing, and like any topic worth its salt, you end up with more questions that you have answers, or then you have answers rather, um, especially in relation to how deep the topic is, and what more uh deep of a topic is there than death? It's like all the ancient religions were or ancient mythologies were all centered around it. They all had this grandiose mythos. I mean, the Egyptians had this idea about the soul leaving the body and traveling, past the celestial bodies, and there was like literally a journey that the soul goes on past like Orion's belt or something like that. And even that, it's like I don't think that is just mythos. I think the more I look into it as well, the more I have to consider that in some weird way it's all true. And so one of the things I was on my other show, Nephilim Death Squad, I was having a conversation with a gentleman. He was remaining anonymous, but he was somebody who was a victim of sort of an abduction scenario, although he didn't necessarily see it as victimized. He was in a dark place in his life, just the difficulties of things like divorce and such. And um, sometimes I think when you are in a very vulnerable position, that's when the magic can happen, for good or bad. Things might have an interest in you suddenly, and you might be more receptive to communicating with them. And so, to make a long story short, and I know that the series of words that I'm about to say are going to sound very fantastic, but as people who literally go searching for the fantastic, I hope you won't mind. But he has a series of experiences that lead him to believe that he's essentially abducted by something that is like an angelic being. Um, he comes to during a sort of surgical process, which is very reminiscent of people who have alien abduction experiences. Um, and these entities or these beings that look like men, they console him and they tell him that he actually consented to this before he came here, meaning like before he was born. Whatever's happening to him now is something that he already consented to, which upset him deeply because how could he consent to something he didn't even know what it was? Um, and one thing leads to another. He ends up blacking out. Uh, but before he does, they say they're upgrading him for something that's coming. So when you're talking, Tabitha, about this concept of like purgatory and Christ returning and there being this big what's the expression for it? Rapture and such, like a war essentially. Um, he is being upgraded for that. And then he goes to another place where he is in a giant uh room. What ceiling is the height of essentially the sky that we see when we go outside, and everything is white marble with giant golden veins going through it. And he has this experience where he believes that he walks with God, and he doesn't get to see him, but he feels his presence, and they have a conversation that he's told he's not going to remember now. And then he wakes up. All of this sounds wild if it wasn't for the fact that I've already discovered 5 other people with the same story. I've had people reach out to me. It's only been a week. It's not been a week. It's been like 3 days. And I've had people reach out to me. 5 different people reach out to me with the same story. And then I was made aware of 2 other testimonies. So that's a total of 7 people now. If you include him, that's 8. Right? So when we say that the spiritual realm, Ray, you said that I was going to be disappointed with your response of like it's all of the above. I don't find that disappointing at all. I find that actually very genuine, because if you were to come here and say, I'll tell you what it is definitively, I'd go, oh, geez, all right, you know what I mean? Like, but that tells me that like you are actually looking, because I'm not very intelligent, but I'm honest in my searching, and I've gotten to the point where like I also have very little information and very many questions. And the more I search, the more the pile of questions gets larger and larger. And I remember um, when I was younger, I wasn't even that young. I developed a relationship with my uncle before he passed away. But the crazy thing is, so I didn't have a relationship with him, and then we sort of met when I was already an adult, already a father, already a husband, and he was like a mentor figure to me for a short time. A huge impact in my life. Um, no kids of his own, and he really took to me. And he was a cool guy. Long beard, long, flowing hair. He played the blues on like an electric guitar, and he barely spoke. You ever see like Lord of the Rings where they speak, the trees speak at the Ents, right? And they barely say anything and they speak very slowly, but when they finally spit it out, it's like hugely impactful. He was like an ent. He would speak real slow. You'd have to you'd feel him like getting ready to speak, and everybody would go quiet, and it would take a while until finally like his voice cracked and he would say something, and it was either funny or wise or a mixture of the two. Great guy. He ends up passing away because of a medication issue. And the I would say the night before he passed away, I had this dream where I don't think I've actually talked about this on the show. I had this dream where I was in a supermarket and he was in the aisle with me, but he was different. Like his hair was lighter and his beard was lighter. Not white, but like it certainly wasn't salt and pepper anymore. And he has like a straight up like Gandalf the White robe going on, but it was like thick and burly, like it had a big fur neck piece, and it just drug behind him on the ground. And I'm trying to get his attention, and he's like not looking at me. He's just walking down the aisle. And I'm trying to get around him to get in front of him and be like, "Hey, Uncle Mac," like whatever the heck I was trying to say to him. But I couldn't. It was like the suddenly the aisles were too narrow for me to get around to get in front of him. And, that's just the whole thing. That's all the dream was. He just kept going and getting further away until I woke up. And then the next day, my wife and I are in the supermarket, and as we're there, we get a call that he died. And, so things like that are like this whole realm doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense at all. But it's clear that it's so much more spiritual than people. At least some people. Don't you find that there's a little bit of a disappointment when you come across somebody who doesn't even want to have the conversation, who doesn't even want to like spiritual realm? Like, what? I
Yeah.
don't want to. And it's
A
like,
lot of people
man.
are afraid of death, because we don't really know what's going to happen. But there are people who just don't want to talk about it at all. But like for you, that's kind of like you got a gift. You're able to see your uncle, like right before. So that's really interesting. Like we've had people share a lot of stories that's about their loved ones that's passed. A lot of times it's like right before they pass away, or after they pass, you'll have like a dream about them. Like 3 days later, it's weird. Like my mom, and she passed away. I had some weird dreams, and it was always like me trying to, like talk to her, and but you can't. Like you're always stopped. Like there's something there telling you, like, nope, you're not. You're not allowed to because you're not at that realm, and so I don't know what to think. It's very interesting, and I love to hear people's stories. What they experience.
Do you guys ever get the impression when you're trying to communicate with something, right? You're asking questions, it's interacting with one of the many toys that you lay out for it. And a lot of the times it's kind of tempered with this idea of like, oh, like you were saying earlier, a little girl died here. Have you ever gotten the impression that something was not being honest, that you were dealing with something that was in fact negative, and like, maybe using the image of something much more innocent?
Oh yeah. So there's this place called Sedamsville Rectory, and Tabitha's been there a lot. Like it's a weird place. Like I don't want to say like it's like a possession kind of thing, but like you get this desire to keep wanting to investigate this place. This place was featured on I think Ghost Adventures like a long time ago, and they even they like to exaggerate, but they were kind of right about this place where it had like just a totally different feeling to when you walk in. It feels bad, like something bad's here. So there's an attic in that house, and they used to teach kids up there. And whenever we went there, we would hear like footsteps moving around, and people would hear laughter, like children. They were like drawn to the attic, and it's nothing like good happens. Like when you go up there, it always just feels weird. I had one friend that she's like a Reiki master. Every time she'd go up there, she would feel like she was going to fall down the stairs, like something was going to push her down. But like we would always say, oh, let's go up and see if we can like get any kids on our voice recorders. And we never do, but we get it just always feels like something like there like, anyway. So long story short of that, like whenever people say like, oh, there's a child that's like a ghost or whatever, a lot of times like there's a story of like, no, it's a demon. So I don't know, like I just remember like just a bad feeling going into that place a lot. But like we loved it because we got a lot of activity there. Like we had I think I won't play it yet, but we have a video where we are in the prostitute place, or I'm sorry, not prostitute place, City Amsville, and there's this chest set on the third floor. We keep hearing sounds, so we're all the way up to the third floor, and we go into this room, and there's a piece on, like something through this piece on the floor, and we do this thing called sweeps. So like when you enter a house, we check everything before we conduct an investigation and make sure things are, so we know where everything's at and things are in place. So that piece was not on the floor. That was, on the board when we walked in. But later at night it was thrown. So I don't know. So like it's, yeah, like you can be deceived. I just, I don't know what, like why.
Tabitha, what are your thoughts on maybe some of these things using especially when it comes to like the image of a child, right? Because that's like innocence, and it also provokes sort of an empathy in you, where like you want to go towards this thing. There's also this notion of like helping these spirits, which is actually a theme you'll see again and again, especially when it comes to various films, right? It's like,
Oh yeah.
you need to free the spirit. But what is this, like movies where it's like burn the house down and free the spirit? They're locked in the basement kind of a deal. But I kind of temper my idea of any entity with like, if people can lie, then certainly so can they. In your experience, does that kind of ring true in any way?
Yeah, there's definitely vibes at certain locations. You definitely get the impression that like dark things happen there, or you get the idea that that things are at peace here. So that's a good question, because depending on your view of hell, if hell does exist, then there's definitely demons that can impersonate the living, or passed on. So like your grandma or someone you care for could be impersonating them, and that's who you're really talking to. Or if you view that hell doesn't exist, then that would mean that like human spirits are just, or there's good ones and bad ones, that just like and across the population, that there's some jerk spirits. Like there's been times where we're talking to someone, and we get the impression that there's a bully. They're like, bullies at the window or bullies at the door, don't let them in. And so there's been times I've been on investigations, and they're like, do not talk to this person, don't give them any chance, because they run off all the friendly ghosts. And so I was like, well, in some groups, they would call that a demonic presence. Well, another group would call that a bully, or, just a jerk, and so I guess it kind of depends on how you're approaching it. It's like, well, is that just like old man Billy Bob, who just hated people, or is that like, or do you got a legion of dark demons? But I do definitely believe that some can be impersonating the ones you're talking to, but I also believe that the amount of energy that it takes for them to communicate, that I'd imagine most are probably legitimate. Because like if you're talking to a little girl, well, they want to talk back, so they may use all the little energy they have to communicate. But if they seem to be really talkative, then it's like, well, where's all this energy coming from? And of course, there's experiments, like some people do like the Jacob's ladder and other fancy things that, or some do like a kind of a white noise that in theory can help give energy. Sometimes we'll even say, well, this device has batteries in there. You can drain this if you need the power while we got everything else going on.
What happened with like our equipment being drained.
Yeah, that does happen. Like, you have a full battery and like minutes later it's completely drained and all that. And sometimes these are brand new batteries too that make no it doesn't make sense unless you're in the paranormal, where it does make sense that something needed that power. Of course, it does make you wonder how a ghost knows how to turn a battery into ghost power, but of course it's all a mystery. We're all figuring it out. It's like sometimes I wonder, well, if they can pull energy from a battery, they know how to work on DC current. Can they like put their ghost fingers into the outlet and use AC power? Because that's one thing. It's always the battery. It's always the camera. It's always the most important equipment.
Yeah, that was the one thing that they always tell you, like, make sure you bring a pack of batteries with you.
Yes.
Because stuff tends to just, drain. You put like a fresh pack. You mentioned, you kind of talked about mental health earlier, about like schizophrenia. And that got me thinking about, like, you do have to go into ghost hunting with a certain mindset where you're kind of just an observer. You're not there to go in and say, oh, I went, you don't want to say I'm here because I want to be possessed. Like most ghost hunters just come in because they want to just see what happens. So I think, a lot of people who are, sensitive to that, or sensitive, like where they're influenced easily, like they probably shouldn't, go on ghost hunts, because those are the people that you see that will go home and they say they're possessed. And I don't know, that's another like topic, but that's something that's pretty interesting. I was telling Tabitha, I would like go on about the farmhouse that I went to. And Tabitha, she didn't go to this one. This was a long time ago, where I was called in by this lady who's a psychic. She's like the local psychic to where we live. And this big place, like, has 10 rooms, and they foster children. So there's, I think, like, there's 9. I was looking at my old notes. There's like 9 children there. And the house had a ton of like video cameras inside, but not on the outside, which is, we didn't realize that until we walked inside and looked around. And the reason why is because they had to keep track of the kids. But the kids kept getting weird experiences where they, like, stuff got moved and they were hearing things. They caught something weird outside. But so, like, when we get contacted a lot by people that just want like a private investigation, And this place had a lot of history. So like what we do is we end up doing a lot of like research for like property records and stuff. But the lady that owns this house, we actually got to witness a possession, which I've never
really?
thought in my entire life I would ever see something like that. I don't want to say like that she was, actually possessed, but we were just like sitting in the kitchen with our equipment, and I can show the picture of the lady, the psychic, so just to see if you kind of like see what I'm getting at.
Do you feel like she was maybe not so genuine?
I don't. Yes, this lady herself, like the psychic, is not a very genuine person. But she looks.
Oh, here we go.
I'll show you a picture. So let me find. Let's see if you can see.
I actually
here.
have a recording of somebody who was possessed. Maybe I'll send it to you after the show because
wow.
I'm saving it. Yeah, and one of the things that's happening is it's one person who is going through. Unfortunately, they passed away like right after this recording. But it's one person who is. Oh, here. Let's see this picture real quick. Add to stage.
So it doesn't look great because it's in black and white, or it's a night vision camera. This is like back from 2017.
Because it's in black and white, it's like inherently spooky looking to me.
But she always had this like this kind of vibe about her.
I think it's something about her brow is like low in a straight line. Like she does not look happy whatsoever. She looks very mad actually that you've taken a picture of her.
And it's like they always say take pictures of me so that so like when you take a picture in ghost hunting, you try to take pictures of people because you may catch something behind them.
Right.
So you always try to take pictures in three. So you snap 3 pictures in order and see if you can catch something. So that's why I do have a lot of pictures of people, but like this lady though, like she like come to find out near the end, like she was asking for money for us to show up. Like she didn't tell, she didn't see any of that when we showed up to investigate. Like we had to drive like an hour away. But she told this lady that owns this house that she was possessed. And yeah, so this is the house. It's not a great picture, but that's the front of it.
Definitely old.
And yeah, so like here's an example of like what their rooms look like. It's just pretty, just very busy because they, a lot of children. And so here is the upstairs room. So like this was kind of like the main area that they had a lot of experiences in. So they so all the kids are upstairs and it's kind of like looped in a big circle on the second floor. And there's a glass case over here, and I had a obelisk with me. Have you ever heard of an obelisk? What that does, it shows the like words, and it reacts to like just it has different sensors on it, so it's triggered by like EMF and other things. But so the words grandma came up and watch and within right when we were by the glass case, and it to the owner, she said that was very significant, about that, and I thought that was interesting. But near the end, this is a very blurry picture, but this is the lady right here sitting down. And she's saying she is possessed by the spirit in that house, and that and the psychic lady was telling her she kind of like instigated it, where she's like, "You're possessed, and you need to go see. Let's go see what this is." And so she sat her down on the couch, and the lady kept saying, "I feel it, going into my body," and she said she kept feeling cold. Trying to remember what else happened. Like it was just very bizarre because it just happened so fast. Where
It's
you know,
hard because these people, like, it's always my understanding that if you want a good psychic, number one, they don't charge, right? So that's always
right?
a big red flag when she's just like, I want X amount of dollars by the end of this thing. But number two, it's like I went to New Orleans recently, and I was walking down the street with my wife, and I wanted to have an experience with a psychic. But in my mind, I was like, they got to see me and be like, David, like as I pass by, you know what I mean? Like you've got to do some psychic shit for me to want to participate.
Yeah,
And we ended up going to somebody who did tarot to me, and it was very interesting actually. I'll give him that. He was a lot of fun, and he was a bit of a character. But he did, you know, through his tarot have some really interesting insight. So I definitely think there's some validity to it. But unfortunately, it's like the whole realm is oversaturated with that lady. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, so you have to be careful, and then you also have to be careful if, like, say you're going through something hard in your life, like there's people like her that will sense that, and it's really hard to tell, like, is this real or
Am I being
um,
taken advantage of?
yeah. So like,
And that,
yeah, there's
yeah,
a lot of
that's a
that.
shame.
There is
Do,
a large amount of people in the paranormal who I think have mental health issues.
mm,
Like the people that you'll go to their house and everything is proof of a haunting, and you're like, I haven't seen anything that's a proof, but it's like, it, um, but there's nothing you can say that they're completely convinced that they're being haunted. Um, and,
right.
um, and then sometimes it's just like the more you listen to them, it's just they're just making up stuff, and it's like, but and you feel sorry for them, but if you're going to drive a long distance to do investigation, you want to make sure it's legitimate,
Right.
and a lot of times what they say, and it is true. Like the few times that I've had it really big experiences, there was no proof. There's no video camera was going. No, I didn't have a picture or anything. But sometimes it's like things are so wild. Their stories. It's like, well, it's not provable. And
Mhm.
and then
Yeah, it's nice when you
normal.
have somebody else to correlate it to, right? Like if somebody else can be there with you. I had something where for a while, I moved into a new home. I bought my first house, and as weird as this sounds, I know, like, right, within this you find people who, like you just said, are mentally ill. But and I know I'm gonna say some shit that sounds wild, but like something felt like it was trying me. And I like trying my house, trying to get in, knocking at night, knocking in the daytime, knocking on all the windows, like. And one of the saving graces was that, like, I heard it, my wife heard it, my son heard it, my cousin heard it, my niece heard it. We'd be standing in the living room having a conversation, and something would like rap on the window,
Mhm.
and we would fling the door open as fast as we could, and there'd be nothing. I'd be sitting there, and it would happen, and my son would go, Dad, how come something's always knocking? And I'd go, I don't know. You know, like I don't know what
No,
to
you
tell
need
him.
to
I just
do
go, like, I
a
don't know.
yeah. You need to research that property because you might unveil something that is you know really weird. Like that
So
house that
I've
I had to
had
research.
I
Sorry,
haven't researched it necessarily. Okay,
yeah.
so I'll tell you the quick story. What actually happened? I don't think it was my house. I think there was something, right? Like if something can be stuck in a house, maybe something can just be stuck in like an area, right? Like it doesn't have
Mhm.
to be within confined within walls. So one day, I had a puppy. I'm walking the puppy. It's very small, and my neighbors unfortunately are screaming at one another. Like it's a husband and a wife, and they're arguing, and you can hear they're just calling each other the worst things in the world, and it's echoing through the streets. It's very embarrassing. And as I'm walking the dog is so frightened by this that she just plants her butt in the dirt and now won't move. And
Bad energy.
yeah, and we're kind of like right in front of these people's houses. And I'm mortified because they are saying horrible things to one another. And I put together that like the wife had forgotten something important somewhere. So they had to backtrack their steps. So she's a stupid SOB and he's a, piece of shit. And they get in the car and they storm off. And when they storm off, they leave like everything open. Like their garage is open, the lights are all on in the house, like, and it's getting dusk now. So I go, man, that's crazy. They were so angry they left everything open. Anyway, and as I'm sitting there with the dog and I'm trying to convince her to move, a family's approaching and they've got a stroller and they've got some kids that are older and they're walking. And I'm about to have like this really nice, wholesome moment, right? I'm a dude with a puppy. They have kids. They're going to come by and say something nice like, oh, cute puppy. I'm going to say, oh, lovely evening. You know, like something cool is going to happen. And so I'm waiting for this to happen. And as they start to approach me in my peripheral, in the driveway of where this fight just happened, I see a man standing in their garage, but I'm not really thinking about him because I'm about to have a nice moment. And all of a sudden he starts beelining for me. Like, you know, when somebody sees you and they start like speed walking towards you, and I'm mortified because I'm like, this guy is about to apologize for what I've heard. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. And I don't want this interaction at all. I'm like, this is not, I don't even want to. So, and I'm not even really thinking about the fact that I'm pretty sure I just saw him leave, but whatever. So, as he's coming towards me, I'm literally turning because I'm so non confrontational. I'm turning my body to communicate with this family. And we have this moment, but I see him and he's like, by the time my vision cuts away, he's like 6 feet away from me. So I know at the pace that he was moving and everything, like this dude's right on top of me. So I'm ignoring him and I'm going, hey guys, how you doing? Lovely night, da da da. And they go, oh, cute puppy. And we have it. It's awesome. We have the good, wholesome moment. But this guy doesn't say anything. And I'm like, I'm like filled with like a sense of anxiety because I don't want to have him go, I'm sorry you heard me and my wife scream at each other like we hated each other. And I don't want to have to go, I didn't even hear anything. What? No, like, because that's what I was going to do is like lie to his face. And he never says anything to me. So I go, all right, dude, like I got to be the one. So I turn around, nobody's there, which is great because I'm like, this is awesome. I don't know what I saw. I saw a man. I could see the family. I could see the clothes they were wearing. It was dusk, not nighttime. This dude was all black, like a silhouette moving at me. But I didn't think about it at the time because this is essentially broad daylight still, right? Spooky things don't happen when you have a puppy and there's a family and there's a man walking to it. Like, my only concern was the awkwardness of the situation. So I get the puppy. I go inside. I tell my wife, hey, it's crazy. I just saw the neighbors screaming at each other. I tell them the whole story, and my niece goes, so there was no dude? And I was like, no, thank God there was no dude. And she's like, but you saw a dude. And I was like, yeah, I saw a dude, but like, he wasn't there. And I didn't have to. And she's like, no, that's creepy. And I was like, huh. Yeah, it is creepy. That night, knocking on my door, no one's there. Knocking on my windows, no one's there. Knocking on my garage door, no one's there. Everybody's window is getting knocked on. And this goes on for like 2 weeks, right? And so, like, this thing felt like so I think there's a rule, like, you have to invite them in. And that's not my own shit, right? You've heard that too. Like, you got to invite them in. And they're knocking. They want in. And so, because I had a previous experience where I, in fact, saw, well, in a dream saw, but then my wife in a dream saw, and then my son in a dream saw the same entity, which was like, yeah, dude, it was like a pivotal moment in my life where I was in a deep, dark place. I was depressed, and something was like tormenting me for 4 consecutive nights. On the 4th night, it showed himself. And that night it also showed itself to my wife. And then on the 5th night, it showed itself to my son. And then I was done. I was like super done. Not a Christian. I'm not a Christian. I 100% believe in Christ. There seems to be this correlation. You can make these things go away. Doesn't matter what it is. Alien abductions.
So I need to go through the emails because we get a lot of emails and it's very, very similar stories. Like they're going through something and then they see something or experience something at their house and then they want us to investigate. Most of the time we end up not, going, but that's interesting.
There's a correlation between being in a deep, dark place, like super sad, super anxious, super depressed, angry. I was very angry. I had just basically failed cutting it out in Las Vegas and had to go back to New Jersey with my tail
It's a hard
between my
place.
legs, essentially, more or less. You know, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but that's what I felt like. Is like we took a shot, we got our asses kicked, we had to come back to New Jersey, we landed with the in-laws. I'm a big failure. That was like the cloud that was looming over me,
Mm.
and then yeah, so there was consecutive nights of like it's knocking, but it's knocking on my mind, not at a door, because nobody else could hear the knocking. I
Mm.
was woken up constantly by the knocking. Nobody else was. Then it was pulling at my arm, pulling at my leg while I'm sleeping. And I'm just like ignoring it. I'm not telling my wife that this is happening for 2 nights in a row. I'm not saying anything because I don't want to feed into it. It's like you always wonder why they don't tell anybody in the horror movies. Like, how come you never tell anybody you saw a greasy entity? That's why. Because as soon as you have this notion, like if I feed into this and I pay attention to it, it's going to persist, or
Yeah.
worse, they're going to experience it. And then the third night, I see it. So my timeline was a little bit up. The third night, I do see it, and my wife wakes me up in the morning and describes what she saw, and I don't even tell her
Mm.
what I saw because it's the same thing, and it's like a big, like his skin was like gray and black, like cheetah print. He had tusks, like not huge, but like canines on the bottom. They were overlapping his upper lip. Bright red eyes,
Mm.
like maraschino cherries. That's always the way that I describe it. And he's like heaving with rage, like, and that's the whole dream. I just see him standing there. I see him real well. That's the only thing I see in the whole dream. Feels like it lasts forever. I'm just looking at this thing, swirling black mist around its legs. And then the next morning, my wife says, I had a nightmare that you were being pinned down in bed by this like rage monster with red eyes and like giant fangs. And I didn't tell her like, well, in fact, I was. You know, I
Yeah.
just kept it to myself because I didn't want to. And then so I still didn't tell her. Then the fifth night, everything seemed okay. Woke up in the morning to my son screaming, having a night terror, the
Mm.
only time he's ever had one. And he describes this scary monster with what weird skin and bright red eyes and sharp teeth. And I was like, we're done. Like I didn't know what to do, so I prayed. It was not Christian, not Catholic, not religious, but very desperate, like
Mm.
totally out of angles, and it worked like a charm. And now things happen. They still happen to me, and I am like the worst Christian. I'm not a Christian at all. Like, I'm like a weird dude who talks about insane crap on the internet. I'm kind of a troll on Twitter, but like when anything happens, I like with authority tell shit to get out of my house in the name of Christ, and it like washes it completely. And
Yeah.
so that made me I turned a whole corner and started doing a bunch of really different research after that, like really different research, and it's brought me to a very strange place. But that's why I asked you earlier about, or I mentioned like I think they feed off of negativity and fear and things like that, because this thing drove me to I was sad and I was depressed and I was angry, and then for 4 nights I was terrified, and this
Mm.
thing was just eating. And then once it got strong enough, it showed me itself, and then once it showed me, I was like, oh, well, now that I see it, then the flip side of the coin has to be real. That was my thinking.
Yeah.
Is like, if it's going to expose itself to me, then that part is real, and then so is the other part.
Yeah, you got pushed to a corner and then you gain strength to, fight it back.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
And I think it's people like you guys are important because you're going in there with equipment, and like I just saw you a second ago. You've got notes going back like what years?
mm,
So there needs to be, in my opinion, an awareness brought to the fact that like there is a spiritual realm. I go a little bit further, and I do think that there's a form of like spiritual warfare, but I don't think that you can be, how do you say, like neutral. Or I don't think that you can, sure, but it's not good to go around believing that this doesn't exist, because there's a whole other dimension to life that is completely parallel, mostly overlapping our experience, and I think also influencing our experience. And people think that it's reserved to movies, like we mentioned, The Exorcist and things like that, and that there is a measurable, and I think the field is changing too, what you guys do, because there used to just be dowsing rods, but now there's equipment. You know, you have laser grids that sense movement. I know people use those PlayStation, they have other ones now,
Yeah,
but like the movement detectors,
the
those are weird as
Connect.
hell because, yeah, the
Yep.
Connect. I've seen Tesla ones where it's like there's a dude in the graveyard
Yeah, I
just
don't like
walking around.
watching though. I don't like watching it. It's like I was in yeah, like some places and you see the screen. I'm like, okay, so there's a entity like right beside me.
Yeah.
Especially ones that are tiny, like they look like kids. We were yeah, Tabitha and I were at Post Town Elementary, and that's where we saw that. Like they were just like hanging around these school desks, and I'm like, I can't do this. But I mean, but it's exciting. With yeah, the Connect stuff. I don't. Yeah, we don't use that. I think. Do you own that, Tabitha?
I don't, but
The tablet.
I know someone that does the SLR camera system
Yeah.
and all that stuff. But we stopped using it because like it always had a figure in front of us. Like no matter where we are, we're like in a parking lot. We're like, it's like we're at our own house and all that stuff. Like it always maps something. So we started thinking that it was just overly sensitive and like who knows, it's maybe picking up dust in the air coming down, and because it was like always somebody dancing. Like I mean, it was literally no matter where we were at, there was like some skeleton just dancing there, and it's like legs bouncing up and down. And I was like, after a while, it's like I'm like, no matter what room we're in, what location we're in, it's always the same thing. And I'm like, I'm starting to think that maybe this is less reliable because I'm like, if it's 100% of the time, I'm like, I think that's a little sketchy. But at first, yeah, it's like, oh, it's right there, and then I'm like, then we turn it, like it's right there, and I'm like, it's always there. I'm like, no matter what.
Yeah, it's
Or
funny.
This
Like
thing really likes the spotlight.
I can
yeah,
sit in a basement in like pitch dark. Can't see anything. But I just have a really hard time with those Connect cameras, and then also listening to audio by myself. So like I'll sit in front of this program called Audacity with headphones on, and I'm just like listening while I'm like doing something else, and it just that for some reason that just creeps me out when something does pop up because like you're like, oh, I heard this, now I can't unhear it. But I mean that's
Well,
part of the excitement.
I want to ask you guys because I do have to get out of here. But before I do, there's something that I always worry about when I see folks like you. Do you not worry about the idea of like an attachment, picking up a hitchhiker?
My family do. Like my husband will say, "Did you bring anything home?" And I always come in with the intention of I'm here to just observe, and I am here to help. Like I have that intention in my head. I never experienced anything, at home, negatively or, with that. Some people involve their families, like they bring their kids on the ghost hunts. And I don't think I can bring my daughter in yet. She's 8. I think that's a bit too young. There's this, I have seen people bring their kids and they were terrified. But, and then how can you explain that to your kid when if they do see something, like you can't, I don't know, it seems too irresponsible. I didn't, yeah, like that's my answer really. Like I don't come in, threatening these things or anything. I'm not there to remove you or, I guess I try to come off with a certain intention. I'm just there and to record to see if you're here. I don't know. How about you, Tabitha?
I definitely think attachments can be real. And I didn't really think that there was much to it until I went to see Robert the Doll in Key West.
Oh yeah.
And like it's supposed to be the most haunted doll in the world. And so I was with a tour guide in essence, and they said there's all these signs that saying ask permission before taking photos and all that stuff. the tour guide said, don't ask permission because then you're talking to the spirit. And they're like, by talking to the spirit, you can get attachment. So they're like, just take pictures. But it was like, there's all these like papers there, like people like just had nothing but bad luck if they took a picture without asking for permission. But I'm like, well, this is the tour guide. He said, don't ask permission. He said, ignore the signs. So I took a lot of pictures and all that stuff. And I had so much bad luck. I ended up emailing it because Robert the Doll has an email address. You can actually mail a letter, but they had an email because they said they get so many letters from people who encounter Robert and then had nothing but bad luck. But I think I had 6 flat tires in a matter of a month. My car was totaled. A guy did a U-turn and totaled the car. Every rental car I had, I think I went through 7 rental cars and I had a flat tire every week. I mean, it was just like everything that could go wrong was like going wrong. And after that, I had someone who's in the paranormal said, I remember you took a picture of Robert without asking for permission. And I was like, is that what it is? Because I'm like, God. I wrote an email to Robert and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, we need to work together. I'm like, you got some power on you. I'm like, imagine what we could do if we team up. I was like, let's be friends, not enemies. But I have been on some ghost hunts where like we'll like say, if anything's here, stay here. This is your home. My home is my place. This is your place and all that. Please don't, you're not allowed to come with us. But admittedly, I kind of slacked off over the years until this whole Robert thing. And now I'm like, I don't care what we have to do. Let's have a prayer circle. We'll make sure that whatever stays here, whatever lives here stays here. Because I'm like, I don't got time for that.
I do think that they have to, it's weird. I think they do have to follow rules. And I think that we have the ability to like set boundaries, or else why would there be this like long standing tradition of like always close the Ouija board, always say goodbye. You know what I mean? Like there's the vampire, right, has to be invited in. There's like all this lore about like they have rules. Even in the Bible, it says something about we struggle with powers and principalities. Like there are rules to this spiritual realm. And so even Ray, what you're saying, it sounds like you go in with a certain amount of caution, because maybe you don't a set of rules, but you do operate in a way that is like, I don't need this coming with me, and I am picky with the way that I go about it. I would say that that's a good way to operate. Like I'm not going to do it because I have a feeling like I'm one of these people that these things like to show themselves to.
So you seem like a person that would attract like if you came on a ghost hunt with us, I think we would get some stuff because there are a lot of people that are like that.
I have no interest in it, not because I don't think it's real, but because I think it's very real. And I just can't risk, I've got a pretty good system of making things go away, and it's worked very well for me, but I don't want to tempt that, you know what I mean? I don't want to keep pressing my luck. And so, even recently when my wife and I were in New Orleans, we're on the 2nd or 3rd story in a hotel room, and we wake up at the stroke of midnight to something banging on the 3rd story window.
Yeah, New Orleans is like the best place ever to go for that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I know you didn't want to see that, but
no, it's also a great place to see homeless people's testicles falling out of their shorts as they fall asleep on the sidewalk. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on, but look, I gotta go. I want to thank you guys for your time. Can you one last time tell the audience where they can find you?
Sure. You can go to Tennessee, Ohio, paranormalsociety.com. We can go to my Twitter account, Kitty Treats. Tabitha is tabithahawk.com. What other social media do you have?
And if
Instagram?
Linktree, my name is just Linktree / Tabitha Hawk. And that will give you a link to all my crazy hobbies, because I have a lot of weird hobbies. I do storm chasing, and I love famous graves. So famousgravehunter.com is one of my websites. So I've been all 50 states and a cemetery in each one of them. And but yeah, ghost hunting, of course. But yeah, the best is to do every hobby at once, like in one day. Those are the best. I'll wake
Ghost
up.
hunting in a storm.
Yeah, so there's one time, like I was in Kansas, and I was in what is it, Dodge City? Yeah, Dodge City. And so there was a hill there that had some really old graves, and also I started there in the morning. And then it could have chased me a tornado later in the day, and then ended up in Wichita and started going to some paranormal sites there. And I was like, wow, I hit famous graves, storms, and paranormal all in one day. I'm like, that's how we do it.
I'm sorry, Tabitha. That's very masochistic. That is not. That's a very dangerous day. But for some reason, I feel like I would be much more comfortable chasing storms than chasing spirits. That being said, though, if you guys are ever doing anything cool in Florida, because Florida is where I'm at, and you reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're doing an investigation, and it's not that far from you," I would be tempted, and I might tag along, and maybe we could make something cool of it. So keep me in mind if you're ever in Florida.
Yeah,
Yeah,
St.
for
Augustine
sure.
and all that. You got a lot of neat places down there.
Oh,
St.
see,
Augustine.
I'm by Tampa, so I know like St. Augustine. I think is more south of St. Peter's, right?
It's on the Atlantic side, south of
Right.
Jacksonville. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I don't think that's that far from me at all, actually. Yeah. So if you guys are ever doing anything cool here, shoot me a message on. Ray knows how to get in touch with me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. But thank you guys so much for joining me. To the audience, thank you for listening. And one more time, guys, if you're listening, make sure you go over and subscribe to Nephilim Death Squad, because as I said at the top of the show, we are currently streaming episodes of Nephilim Death Squad in like 5 different places, and we're looking to consolidate. And so I'd hate to have any of the audience be looking to this channel when we announce an episode's about to go live and not be able to find it. So if you're not already subscribed to Nephilim Death Squad, please head over there and do so. And if you are listening on the audio version only, you can go over to Nephilim Death Squad. You'll find us on Spotify. I'm working on getting us up on Apple Podcasts. It's actually a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be. So, the same thing goes for the audio listeners. If you saw an announcement on social media, you saw a cool guest, we are getting ready to have Jerry Marzinski on Nephilim Death Squad this Sunday, I believe. And Jerry Marzinski is a clinical psychologist of 30 years who spent all of his time dealing with schizophrenic patients. And even though he is a clinical psychologist working in a professional setting for 30 years, he came to the conclusion that this is actually demonic influence that most of these people are experiencing. And the reason he believes that is because these voices had an ability to tell their victims, I suppose, where things were. He's got a lot of reasons, but some of them were like, oh, if you go into this field and you lift up this board, you'll find drugs. And then these people were finding sort of drug stashes from local drug dealers and suddenly getting drugs and money. Or, if you go into this person's home and you lift the back of the toilet seat, there's cash inside the toilet tank, and they would find it. And so in his assessment, over 30 years of research, he deduced that there was something else going on here. And we just spoke about it with Tabitha and Ray about my aunt's condition with schizophrenia. So this is something that's really interesting to me. I always felt like there was something much more than just a medical issue going on with my aunt. So if you guys are looking forward to that, please make sure that you're subscribed to Nephilim Death Squad on YouTube as well as on Spotify. Ray, Tabitha, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, guys, have a good night.
Thanks. Night.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
That went well. That was fun.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. I know last time other people would like